Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another of these very interesting Zhong Jieming Toys figures, and as you can see, this time we've got ourselves a Velociraptor. Not just a Velociraptor, it very clearly is Velociraptor Blue. At least that's what they were going for. It's not an officially licensed Velociraptor Blue, but it's definitely Velociraptor Blue regardless. And you can see the packaging and everything looks pretty much the same as far as what we've had through the rest of the other two figures that we've reviewed here on the channel. Same thing here on the back of the box. Again, you've got the same images and everything. So no real differences here. Definitely intrigued to check this one out because I feel like we're kind of 50-50 with these. The Ceratosaurus was pretty cool. The Sinoceratops was kind of cool, but a little bit lacking in fine detail. This one looks questionable. I'm not entirely sure about this one, but let's go ahead, pop it out of the box, and we'll check it out. So here is our Velociraptor now out of the packaging, and just as I expected when we turn it around, we do have some screw holes, so, you know, kind of taking us back to our Hasbro days on that side, but overall, there is something very familiar about this sculpt. I can't tell what it is right out of the gate, but it looks like something I've seen before. Again, not saying that this is definitely a bootleg, but I'm not really sure what it is. Maybe there's another version of like kind of one of these off-brand Velociraptors. I think I reviewed a Velociraptor Blue a few years back that was fairly similar in sculpt and positioning to this one. I don't know. I can't really tell what it is, but as far as this figure goes, you can see it's not really that great when it comes to the fine detail, and specifically the lower jaw is super washed out when it comes to the detailing aspect. Like, it looks really, really bad. The detailing on the upper side looks generic, but is a bit more vibrant than we see on the lower side. Up here on the top of the head, I would say it's probably the best looking area overall, besides the fact that we have a really obvious seam moving up through the center of the head. There's a little variation of color to the figure, as we have a gray for the majority of the body color, but up here you have like a brown that's sort of dry brushed over the top of the figure. We can see the mouth is sculpted obviously in an open position because it does have an action feature to it. We also can see the eye is painted oddly, I can say that, very obnoxiously, with a large amount of yellow, then a little bit of brown and a black pupil, and it does not look good at all, and it's actually quite sloppy overall. Like, even looking at the brown there is pretty sloppy as far as the way that it's painted in there. Obviously, we can see the teeth sculpted out on the inside of the mouth. They're painted with a yellowish tone, but not painted very well. You can see the teeth on the lower jaw. For the most part, the paint is missing on them and only painted over the tips. Up here on the top looks a little better, but it's definitely a little bit too thick as far as the application of the paint. Same deal, honestly, for this side as well. Like, entirely the same thing on both the upper and lower jaw. We do have a kind of like a reddish tone for the inside of the mouth. You can see it does have the skin kind of on the side of the mouth back here painted in that red, as well as the tongue, and it does have a strong gloss coat, which is nice to sort of give it that saliva-like look in there. No coloration or detailing for the inside of the mouth on the upper side though, and just like with the Ceratosaurus, we have that random area of white here, which is really strange and always looks terrible on these figures. But as we begin to move back into the neck, you see all kinds of like creasing and stuff leading down through the neck. We can also see the blue stripe begin to pick up. Obviously, they didn't care enough to really make sure that we had the blue stripe correct on it, but it does have a gray outline to the blue stripe, and then of course the blue, so it's very Velociraptor Blue-ish. As you move down along the back, you also have that brown kind of dry brushed over the back moving down. Not really the greatest paint application in the world for sure. As we continue to move down, the skin texture actually begins to look a little more generic, honestly, as we move into the body. Closer to the shoulder area, I can say it looks a little generic, but then as we actually move down further into the body, like into the stomach, it somehow begins to look a little bit better, but still not really that great. Leading down into the arms, we definitely have those long Jurassic Park Velociraptor arms sculpted fairly decently. You've got the fingers sculpted out, some scoots moving down the fingers, and the nails painted, but only for some reason painted on the top of the nails, not painted on the underside. So you want to talk about lazy, that's crazy laziness. Like, I mean, if Mattel, at least when they go out and they don't paint something, they just don't paint it at all. Whereas this company, they only paint over the top, and they're like, nobody will see under here, who cares? Same thing over here. You could see really sloppy paintwork for the nails. You do have articulation in the arms, which is a plus, and you can see they move back pretty nicely. They could definitely swivel all the way around. There we go. So very clearly they can. But as you move back into the legs, you can see some muscle definition in both the thigh and calf leading down. We also have articulation back here. That's about as far forward as the leg goes. It can definitely go back a lot further, so some fairly decent mobility in the legs. As you lead down, the skin texture I think looks better in the leg than it does in most areas of the figure, but still not really that great. Leading down into the foot, you can see the toes are sculpted fairly decently. We have some scoots moving over the toes. The paintwork of the nails is, well, very inconsistent, actually. So we have the undersides of the nails painted on this foot, but we don't have the undersides of the nails painted on the other foot. I don't know what factory this company uses, but they should probably think about changing it. But you can see, again, the nails are painted with a black. They do look awkward, like you can see the sickle claw looks kind of strange over there. And one thing that's interesting is at least when Mattel doesn't paint their dew claws, they at least have it sculpted in. But if my camera would focus on the correct foot, as you can see, we don't even have the dew claws sculpted on this figure. So a little bit of a bummer as far as that goes. Then leading out into the tail, you can see the blue stripe leads out, but it starts to disappear as you lead further out into the tail. And then you only really have that brown dry brushing the rest of the way out. It continues to have fairly generic looking detail the entire way through. We do have a swivel tail though, which I guess is a plus for the figure. Some okay looking detail, but a little bit washed out as far as the overall appearance goes. Moving down along the underside, there's also a seam kind of running along the center of the figure on both the underside and upper side. Not as obvious up here except for right here. Like here it looks okay. A little more obvious on the underside. When we turn it around, obviously you can see the figure looks pretty much the same outside of the positioning of the limbs, and you can also see that we do have those screw holes over here. Sloppy paintwork for the eye on this side as well, but it almost looked better until it ran down. It was very close to looking a little better. You do have the articulation of the arms. Again, over here, just basically on a swivel, so it goes forward and back. And then you have the articulation of the leg. That's about as far forward as it goes. And that's about as far back as it goes. So a little bit more mobility on the other side. But outside of that, the only obvious difference over here is the fact that the leg is taking a step forward compared to what we see on the other side. And the arm is also kind of held out away from the body a little bit further on this side. Same look other than that, though, for the rest of the figure. We do have an action feature, of course, and you can see there's a little button, very Mattel-like, which causes a jaw-snapping action feature. But as you can see, it doesn't have a whole lot of force. It's very, very soft and unimpressive when it comes to that aspect of the figure. As far as a size goes, for a length from the snout to the tail, you are looking at about 9¼ inches, or a little over 23½ centimeters. And then for a height, the highest point is definitely the tail, about 5¼ inches, or just shy of 13½ centimeters, into the top of the head, about 3¾ inches, or a little hair over 9½ centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect A Human Being next to our Zhong Jieming Toys Velociraptor, and you can see it's fairly decent in size, definitely a little bit larger than your standard kind of Attack Pack figure from Mattel. But I think the better comparison that I can give you guys would be with the Mattel Velociraptor, and you can see that obviously the Zhong Jieming Toys version is a little bit bigger than your standard Mattel version. So hopefully this will help to give you probably the best idea of a size for this figure. I don't feel like we really need a ton of comparisons for this one. This is probably going to help you out the most, I would think. So this brand new Zhong Jieming Toys Velociraptor Blue is not really that great. It's pretty lackluster as a whole. The only figure so far that I can say in this line that I was really a big fan of, and not even a huge fan, but kind of a big fan, would have been the Ceratosaurus. The Sinoceratops was okay, and this Velociraptor as well is just kind of okay. There's nothing really super exciting about it. It is kind of a fun, fairly cheap version of a Velociraptor Blue with some decent size to it, but when it comes to the overall sculpt, it's obviously very, very lackluster. The detailing is super generic, and it's also fairly washed out in certain areas. Nothing on the figure is particularly impressive when it comes to the fine detail, and obviously they haven't captured the likeness of Velociraptor Blue perfectly in either the sculpt or paint. The paint is also really quite sloppy overall. The teeth are pretty badly painted, the eye is painted badly, the nails are painted badly. The only thing that doesn't look absolutely terrible when it comes to the paintwork would be the tongue and the blue stripe moving down along the body. The dry brushing looks okay moving along the back as well, but there's just not really a whole lot to it when it comes to the coloration, and obviously when capturing a Velociraptor Blue look, that brown isn't really making a whole lot of sense to me, but at least they gave it a little variation of color. It does have some articulation, which seems to work at least fairly decent. It's not great, but it's better than some of the others have been, and it does have an action feature, which is pretty much the action feature you would expect. And just like the others, it's also really weak and doesn't work all that well. It does serve its purpose, but I can't see kids using this to actually grab things and pick them up because there's just no real force to the bite. But overall, it's just kind of another okay figure. If you are interested in adding it to your collection, I will include a link in the description to where you can do that, again on AliExpress, which is exactly where I purchased mine. So make sure you check that link, pick this up if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.